Can't see up there. All right. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Victor Simmons Jr. I'm the library administrator here at the Auburn Avenue Research Library. I want to welcome you all to the Collecting, Researching, and Writing While Black conference. This session is called Lens of Legacy, Documenting African American Culture Across Generations. The coming together of African American photographers from different generations to discuss their motivations, experiences, and the impact of their work in documenting African American culture. The discussion will explore how their perspectives and techniques have evolved over time and the role of photography in preserving and celebrating African American heritage. I have the honor of introducing our moderator for today, Melissa Alexander. Melissa Alexander is the founder of Phyllis Iller, a company that began as a t-shirt business in 2014, but evolved into a platform for her photography and video work. In 2016, she discovered her passion for photography using her Nikon DSLR to document life in the West End. Her work focuses on inspiring people of color to embrace their identity and potential, often showcasing them in a positive light. Melissa's dedication to her mission has led her to participate in art shows, produce short films, and teach photography to inner city school children. She remains committed to her vision of celebrating individuality and fostering self-love through her creative endeavors. I give you all Melissa Alexander. Give her a warm round of applause.
How's everyone doing tonight? I'm glad you're here with us. I'm gonna just open up a little thing here so I could tell you about these amazing photographers that are sitting on my left and my right. Just one moment. I thought that Victor was gonna be introducing them, but apparently that's gonna be on me. But I don't know. I kind of feel like between the two of y'all, does everybody know about like the accolades and everything that y'all have, or is it just that y'all are amazing, good people? You think you could introduce yourself? Or would you rather me read? Would you rather me read something?
You do your job.
Huh? Okay. All right, we could do that. All right, so on my left, we have Brother Alexander. You ever think that we're kin?
When?
I've always wondered that. I'm like, dang, we both have Alexander as a last name. I'm gonna ask you later. But Jim Alexander, and what's that?
You asked me that once before.
And what'd you say then?
I don't know.
All right, to my left we have Jim Alexander, born in Waldwick, New Jersey in 1935. He's an award-winning documentary photographer who has spent over 60 years refining what he calls the art of documentary photography. A photojournalist, teacher, activist, media consultant, entrepreneur, Navy veteran, and graduate of the New York Institute of Photography, Alexander has amassed an impressive collection of images of Black culture and human rights, which are now housed at Emory University. Everyone say hello to Brother Jim. On my right, we have Susan Ross. Sue is a renowned documentary photographer and cultural activist who has spent over 5 decades capturing the essence of Black Atlanta. Known for her extensive archive of images featuring politicians, artists, community leaders, and everyday people, she has played a pivotal role in documenting the city's history. Y'all say what's up to Miss Sue. So I just want to start by saying, when Victor reached out to me and was like, would you mind moderating a discussion between Sue and Jim, I was like, Okay, well, if you want to make me nervous, ask me that, right? The question, I guess, that I would ask any photographer, the first question is, why photography for y'all?
Why photography? Is my mic on?
Did you press the button up?
Hello. Oh, it's a big difference. Why photography? I don't know. Photography found me. You know, I don't know that I found photography. I've never actually studied photography, but I've had a camera since I was very young and always took pictures of whatever we were doing around. I'm the daughter of a social worker and a cultural anthropologist. And those two things, that community service and that cultural anthropology, combined to make me into the photo griot. So I try to tell stories of our community through photography. You gotta push it up.
Let me see.
That looks like it does.
Oh,
It is there? Got a little, yeah, right there. Test? Test? Okay.
I got into photography shooting dice. I guess I've told this story quite a few times. I went in the Navy when I was 17. And the first weekend, we didn't have much to do when I went to boot camp. So we were behind the barracks shooting dice for nickels and dimes. I rolled a 10, and this guy said, "I bet you can't make it. I bet you $10. I said, "Bet." I didn't have $10. He didn't either. I rolled the 10. I said, "Give me my money." He said, "Here, wait a minute." He went in the barracks, and he came back. I thought he went in there to get my money. He came back with this little yellow box. And he said, "Here, this is the camera. Hold this till payday, and I'll give you your $10. I said, "All right." He said, "It's a camera." He said, "My mother told me to bring it. I ain't taking no pictures." I said, "All right." So payday came. We didn't get but $10. He said, "I ain't giving you my $10. He said, "You keep the camera." He said, "I need cigarettes and this and that and all that." I said, "All right, fine, good." So I went over to the PX and bought a roll of film. And the guy showed me how to put it in the camera and stuff. And I started taking pictures of the guys for 50 cents. It didn't cost me but about 50 cents for the whole roll of film. And I got 12 pictures out of every roll. And I said, "This is pretty good." So that's how I started. Okay, that was what I was going to be doing, telling you how I started. That's how I started.
When did you, all right, because for myself, I didn't really start to call myself a photographer until someone told me they would pay me, right? I had been doing photography, like actually using a camera and documenting things for at least 4 or 5 years. But when someone said to me, "I'll pay you to do this thing that you would do for free," I was like, okay, well maybe I can call myself a photographer now. So when did y'all take on the actual name of photographer, or has there ever been a difference to you in terms of documenting versus being called a photographer?
I took pictures, you know. I didn't necessarily call myself a photographer for many years. And you know, because the people I knew that were photographers, which were people like Bud Smith, who I grew up with, and Jim, they were accomplished photographers. They were, you know, they had studied photography. And I basically picked it up, you know, primarily by doing it. And so I didn't consider myself, and for most of my early life, I took pictures with small cameras. I had Brownie cameras, I had Instamatics, I had Polaroids. I thought real photographers used SLRs, you know, and I wasn't a real photographer. But I did have an eye, and Tony K. Bombara used to love the way I captured things, and she would always call me the eye. So, you know, I have to give it up for Jim, because the first time I ever exhibited, Jim put together an exhibition of about 10 of us who had never exhibited before, and we had an exhibit over at Spelman Fine Arts Building, and I guess that may be the first time anybody actually called me a photographer, was then.
You said, I'm not a real photographer. So after everybody was complimenting her on the stuff that she exhibited, you know, I said, now you're a photographer. Yeah.
Who else was in this show? And like, what year is it? Like, what year are we looking at?
Isn't 1990s, 80s or something?
Mid-'80s.
Mid-'80s, okay.
Yeah.
Mid-'80s.
Are there any photographers that maybe we would know, or are they still active in Atlanta?
Was Faye Bellamy in that show? Let me think.
Yeah, Faye was in it.
Faye Bellamy, she was a SNCC activist, but also a photographer. And I wish I knew what happened to her pictures, because I don't know
Wow.
what happened to her collection at all. The brother at Morehouse, what's his name?
No, no.
I'm trying, well, yeah, I mean, it wasn't, my cousin, Greg Ross, I think he was in it too.
Greg was in it.
Greg was in it. He's not my real cousin, but we call ourselves cousins because there's not a whole lot of Rosses around the world. So I will claim most any Ross as my cousin. There's one or two I don't claim, but everybody else I will.
No,
And-
you said, what year was this, Sue?
This was a mid-'80s, yeah.
Mid-'80s?
Maybe 83,
Okay.
84, something like that.
Now, that's the first time that you may have thought of yourself, or someone may have called you a photographer, but you had been photographing for years before that, right?
Yeah.
I think that's interesting, right? That you would go so long carrying around a camera, photographing the things that like you have, and still never call yourself or like see yourself as a photographer. What would you have used in that, like in the space of saying I'm a photographer? What would you have said?
Well, I was I was a civil servant, and I worked, one of the things, when we just dedicated the MARTA bus to Andrew Young this afternoon, and it'll probably be on the news and all like that, but they've got a series of civil rights warrior buses now that goes from Dr. King to Mrs. Lowry to Joseph and Evelyn Lowry to the Abernathys to John Lewis and Andrew Young now. But when Andy was kicked out of the UN, for talking with the Palestinians, you see, he comes back around again. He came back to Atlanta, and he was back. It was Maynard's last year, and he was talked into running for mayor. And so when he had been a congressman and an ambassador, so he said, well, this is really kind of going back to grade school, but he said, no, people wanted him to run after Maynard, so he ran. And when he came into office, they had given him a book of 35 5x7 pictures that represented all the places he had been, all the people he had met all around the world. And that's all he had to represent his time at the UN. And he said, and so basically what happened, he said, we're going to get cameras and we're going to document our administration. We had no photography positions at that time in City Hall, except a crime scene photographer. And so we bought SLRs and taught ourselves how to use them. And about 4 of us, documented his administration. And that was in addition to what our regular jobs were. My regular job was in minority business development, so I worked with the minority business program, and that's what I would call my job. But my passion was taking pictures and documenting, yeah.
Brother Jim, did you, well, actually, go ahead.
Well, after I finished boot camp, I got stationed in Charleston, South Carolina, and I was working as a diesel engine mechanic, and doing a few pictures around the base. One day I was on the pier with a bunch of the other guys. We were just there talking. And this guy came walking down the pier with this, what I call a big-ass camera. And I asked him, I said, what is that? He said, this is a press camera. He said, I'm a base photographer. And he said, I'm a photographer too. I said, just a minute. I went down in the tugboat and brought up my scrapbook. Back in the day, we used to all have scrapbooks. And I had been taking pictures everywhere around there. And he was looking at my pictures, and he smiled. And he said, well, you got a pretty good eye. He said, I'll show you some stuff. He said, that yellow building down the end of the pier, he said, that's my studio down there. He said, come down there Saturday. If you're off on Saturday, I said, yeah. He said, come down on Saturday, and then I'll show you some things. So I went down there to the pier, and he took me in the dark room. I had looked at all his pictures around the wall, and he took me in the dark room. And when I looked and saw the pictures come up out of the water, I was hooked. I said, yeah, the pictures coming out of the water, I was hooked. And he showed me all kinds of stuff that he was doing in the dark room, black and white and color. And he taught me that, and then he started teaching me, actually how to shoot. And he taught me with his 2 1/4s and 4x5s and all of that. And there was a method to his madness. He was what we call a brown bagger. A brown bagger, that's a person who is on the base, but he lives in town. And then, like, if a ship was coming in or something, or going out, he had to take a picture of it. And so he got me to doing it for him. All right? So that way he didn't have to come in on the weekend. So I started doing that for him. And he kept showing me and teaching me. And I did a lot of stuff like that on the base. And then I started doing pictures around Charleston, in town. And eventually I went overseas and started doing pictures there. I was doing pictures everywhere. And I was building up these scrapbooks. And I don't know if I'm supposed to tell this part about myself or not, but anyway, I had, when I went to the West Coast and was stationed out in Long Beach, and I was going back and forth to LA all the time, me and a bunch of my cronies. and we rented a room in a rooming house for $9 a week. And I had all of my stuff up there at that rooming house. And the lady had a daughter there. And her and I started talking and going out and stuff, you know. So I was stationed there for, I guess, almost 3 years. And I think one day I was drunk, and I told this young lady I was going to marry her.
Oh, boy.
It didn't seem such a good idea when I sobered up. And so I was supposed to get discharged in August. But in July, the ship that I was on was going back to the Middle East. This was in the 50s. And everybody who had less than 4 months to do got out early. So me and one of my buddies, we chipped in and bought a car for $500. And we said, all right, we're gonna drive cross country. He lived in Virginia. I lived in New Jersey. And he said, when we get to the East Coast, we're gonna roll the dice, and whoever won, the other one would buy the car from him, or vice versa, rather. Okay, that's a good idea. I didn't tell nobody I was getting discharged. That's the part I shouldn't tell. When I got discharged, I was easing my clothes out little by little. And when I got discharged, we headed cross country. When we got to New Jersey, he bought the car from me, my half. All right. So it took us about 4 months to go get cross country. We went everywhere, stayed here, stayed there. We worked on farms, we did everything. We had a good time. So when I got home, I kept my foolishness up. And I eventually had an alcoholic problem. And that went on for a while. And then I quit that after a few years. And then I decided I would get back into photography. I liked photography. I've been doing odd jobs and stuff. So I bought a camera. And I was running and shooting in the streets and hanging in New York. Met Gordon Parks and his son and a lot of other photographers, a lot of them known now, some. And I got to doing pretty good. That first collage over there on the right, y'all can walk around and look at them afterwards. But that I call it the first 10 years. Pretty exciting time in the 60s. You'll see a lot of people there that you know, not that you don't know, but I eventually went to photography school, New York Institute of Photography. I had the GI Bill, so I went there and I started doing a lot of photography, commercial photography, but mostly I liked just shooting in the streets. One day when Dr. King was assassinated, I said to Gordon, I said, they're talking about we're free at last. I said, I don't think we're so free. You know, they're killing us off little by little. Everybody who's out there doing anything. I said, I'm just going to document us for 10 years and look at that. And Gordon said to me, well, James, he says, it seemed like you got a plan. He said, but your ass is going to starve. He said, nobody's going to pay you to just run around shooting whatever it is you want to shoot. I said, no, I'm going to photography school, and I'm going to get a piece of paper, and I'm going to teach photography and do my documentary work.
Did it go like that?
Yeah, it went like that. 20 years later, in 1988, when they had the first National Black Arts Festival here in Atlanta, there was a lady here who was a curator. She talked to the National Black Arts Festival, told them she wanted to curate a show of my music work, the stuff that I documented, a lot of black music. And they said, yeah. And Clark, I was a photographer in residence at Clark at the time. And they chipped in for the exhibit, and the show was at the Apex, right next door here, and with that, Gordon came to my opening, and Sue, you were there, right? Yeah, Sue was there. There was a couple of women photographers, actresses there, and one of them by the name of Sandra Sharp. She took a picture of Gordon and I. And that picture went wild. It went everywhere. Yeah, that's the picture that she took, and I use it on my cards that I give out at my gallery. And so that brought me up to where I am now. Okay.
And didn't Gordon say something to you then?
Huh?
What, didn't Gordon say?
Oh yeah. Gordon said to me, well, Jim, he said, you ran around and shot whatever you wanted to shoot. He remembered what he had said to me 20 years earlier. All right? That was one of the best things I've ever heard from someone. Yeah. I was kind of proud of myself.
Definitely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that was two icons at one time in the, shoot. Okay. at one time at that show, you know. I mean, to have Jim walking around, he had about 40 large-scale color and black and white, I guess,
Right.
photographs of musicians of different genres, of jazz, of blues, of popular music. And to see him walking around with Gordon Parks, showing him the work, and for Gordon Parks to then, you know, basically cap it off by saying Jim did good, you know, that was a very exciting time. You know, when you talk about the photographers that have influenced you over the years, I mean, Jim got to actually work with Gordon Parks. I knew Gordon Parks from Life magazine. I knew him from, but you know, we had, I knew Money to Sleep from Ebony magazines, which we had in our house, and I knew Chester Higgins from his books, his early books that he had, The Black Woman, and there was a Black Man book too, so those are some of the photographers that, and Roy DeCarava from the book he did with Langston Hughes. I don't know if y'all have ever seen that, but there's it used to be a little book, and it's now in a big coffee table edition, but they portrayed a Harlem family, and Roy did all of the pictures. So, you know, in terms of people in photography that influenced me, and then I didn't really think about people in my family who influenced me, but I was also influenced by the family photographs we have. We have photographs going back to the Civil War period of black soldiers in their Union uniforms, just after the turn of this, after the end of the Civil War, when they were, and some of them were from, most of them had joined the Union Army in the South and come back, moved north after that. But those are some of the things that drew me to photography. It didn't draw me enough that I thought I was having a career in it, but it was enough that it gave me an appreciation for how you can tell history through photography.
That's I love that, because as I was listening to both of y'all, right, you moved around. I would love to hear more about this road trip between, you know, Cali and New Jersey. Not just yet, but
That ain't got nothing to do with photography.
it don't. But that's what I'm saying. I'm not gonna ask about it now, but that sounds very interesting.
That would be a good movie.
But when people think about photography, you know, they think about ads and they think about, you know, your marketing and all of these different kind of stuff. But as documentary photographers, I think there's something, I can't say there's something different as to why you pick up a camera, but the impact of it may feel a little bit different, right? Because you're not just documenting something for a client, right? You're documenting something from your heart, essentially, right? So, what you got to say about that?
Right, mostly, but I did keep the promise to myself to teach, all right? I started teaching photography to some young kids in 68. And then I was documenting a political rally in Washington, D.C. And this was in the 70s. And I was teaching at Yale and running a black arts organization that I started up there. That's why this whole story is going to be a little choppy. But anyway, when I was in D.C. in 76, shooting that rally, I mean that meeting, it's a conference. Maynard Jackson walked up to me and I asked him to sit there. I wanted to take a picture of him and a couple of other black political figures. And Maynard said to me, he said, "Look, you looks like you know what you're doing with that camera. What else do you do? Like photography was no real job, you know." I told him I have a studio and I also teach photography. And I run an arts organization in New Haven, Connecticut. And Maynard said, "Well, you need to come to Atlanta." He said, "I've just started an organization there, and we need some black folks there who can teach photography and stuff in the arts." And he gave me his card. And when I got back to Connecticut, I told my then girlfriend, we were together for 14 years before we got married. She eventually became my wife. But there's our youngest daughter back there. So anyway, we came down to Atlanta and looked around and everything. We liked it. We stayed here for several days, maybe almost a week, I guess. And so then we moved to Atlanta, and I became the photography instructor at the Neighborhood Arts Center. They have a collection of that work from the Neighborhood Arts Center here in this repository here. So that's how I came to.
And is that one of the collages
Atlanta.
you have over here, the Neighborhood Arts Center?
Huh?
Is the Neighborhood Arts Center one of the collages you have over here?
Yeah, there's a collage there. That's right. That goes over several decades. Some of the pictures from the Neighborhood Arts Center, and then pictures of some of the students and the artists. Let me see. Here's one of my former students from 1978. Raise your hand, Cheryl. There's another one back there behind you, right straight behind her. Okay. All right. And then there's other folks here who hung out in my studio, and then a couple mentees and mentors too, right? Okay. And my daughter was also one of my students at a program that that I ran at Nexus Contemporary Art Center, and there was one of my co-teachers back there. Connie, raise your hand back there. That's Connie. She's one of the cystography people along with Sue. All right. So, all right, move on.
I'm glad you mentioned cystography. Look, Sue ready. Sue is ready. I would love for you to tell us about the collective and your role and all of that.
Well, let me start before cystography. We had a group here in Atlanta called Zone 3, which was black men and women photographers. And we did workshops, we did exhibits, and we did, it just was a place for black photographers in Atlanta to get together. And one of the people that was part of Zone 3, along with Jim and Connie and Bill is here, Gerald Straw. But anyway, one of the central people was Sheila Turner, the late Sheila Turner. And Sheila was a phenomenal photographer who documented a lot of the beginnings of hip-hop photography around Atlanta, as well as a lot of blues musicians and political figures. And Sheila had the opportunity to have a show at Marion Langley's Frames and Fine Art Gallery one summer. And at that show, she extended the opportunity to other black women photographers. And so we spent the summer kind of putting that exhibit together. And we had, well, the spring, I guess, his exhibit was in July. And we had the exhibit in July. And we had so much fun, we said, we need to keep this going. We want to start an organization. And so we started throwing around names for it. You know, we were kind of talking about sisters in photography and all like that. So I shortened it to Sistography, and that became our name. And Sistography has been in existence since 1993, doing 2 to 3 exhibits a year, doing community service projects, and has just been a safe place for black women photographers. I think, you know, we did find out, you know, we didn't have a lot of spaces for blacks to exhibit at that time. We just created spaces. We would go to a neighborhood center, a community center, and ask them, could we show there? And we didn't have access at that time really to galleries, but we had access to all kinds of innovative places. Auburn Avenue has been home to some of our favorite exhibits, actually. We've been in Auburn. We try to exhibit here every 3 or 4 years. And I think we're exhibiting here starting in December or January. We have an exhibit that'll be coming up for Sistography at Auburn Avenue. But it's been a great organization. It's something that stretched me beyond being a picture taker to being a photographer. It was, and also stretched me into things I hadn't thought about, like mixed media projects and collective projects. You know, we did, Lynn Linnemeyer is, what does she call herself? A visual, well, it's not a visual storyteller, it's a visual something. It's like a visual archaeologist or something. I don't know, it's a visual something. And visual mythologist, that's what she calls herself. Because, you know, Lynn did, for many years, a lot of the combination of painting and photography. She went to the Art Institute, I guess it was, and so she was quite an accomplished artist. And of course now she's doing primarily abstract art, but she still does a little bit of photography. But anyway, that stretched us in new directions. We create installations. We do. So it would be work on the walls, but also work in some context. We turned one of the rooms in a Hammond's house into like a child's bedroom. And anyway, it was that stretched me in a lot of different ways that I had never thought of or never considered. So it's been a good growing experience. You know, people have flowed in and out of Sistography over the years. And but there's been a core that's been pretty central to it, and so it's a great organization. Well, and if you're a young woman photographer, you want to be involved, come on and join us.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Sue. Being a woman who's out here documenting, I mean, you have your collective, you have your crew, right? But it can be a heavily male-dominated field. Right? Whether we're talking commercial or we're talking documentary in general. Because like I know what motivates me. Like sometimes when I'm out, not so much as much anymore, more of a studio photographer now for myself. But when I first started out, I was out here in the streets in West End, right? And sometimes I would get a little nervous, right? Like, because I may have been in situations or places that maybe I wasn't supposed to be in. And I have this equipment around my neck and I'm just out here like, this is a beautiful picture. And this is something that's worthy of, you know, the moment being stilled for just a second so I could get this photograph. Have you ever found yourself in situations where maybe you were like, maybe I shouldn't quite be here, or maybe this is a little like dangerous or anything like that?
Well, not so much dangerous. I mean, for me, also being a woman photographer and being short, being in large crowds is dangerous, you know. So you know, some of the documenting things like demonstrations or large festivals even sometimes can be, if you know, can be intimidating, I guess, a little bit for that. And you know, if you're shooting out at night and you're in, you know, certain areas of town, that can be a little dangerous, you know. So, you know, you try to do things in those kind of situations in groups as opposed to by yourself, because if somebody wants to take your camera, you can't really stop them, you know. But, you know, they'll take your camera anywhere you are. I was in City Hall in the communications office, and somebody supposedly in a secure area, and somebody said they were with the custodial staff and got access to it, and, you know, took all of the city cameras, you know. I mean, they just ran off with them, you know. They were all gone. So it is a, you know, you just have to be sensitive to where you are and what you're shooting, and how you're shooting it, and, you know, being respectful to the people that you're shooting, of course.
That can be difficult
Because
sometimes.
if some people, if they don't want their picture taken, don't do it, you know. And if
Have you, like, what is that like for you? That was something that was always a little funny for me, photographing people and they didn't know, right? That's why I kind of appreciated Jamel Shabazz's approach to photographing people on the street, because he was like, hey, do you mind if I photograph you? I had to build my courage up to ask those kind of questions. But how did you approach?
I had somebody at a workshop one time ask me, Mr. Alexander, I get a little nervous sometime when I have to ask people to take their picture. I said, but don't ask me about it. I ain't never asked nobody. You know.
You never asked nobody?
I have never asked nobody
So
yet.
What was your process with that?
I had a camera. That was the process. And then you talk about your students being nervous or something. Let me see how many people here. I took you one time shooting with a Klan march, right? Yeah, took her. And then I had about 4 or 5 students of mine that I used to take all over to Klan marches and rallies. All right? All over. I've got a whole collection of anti-Klan photographs in my studio and gallery, and also had 4 particular students used to go with me all the time. John Ziegler, Harold Dobbs, Charles, and Jackie Clower. Yeah. Yeah.
And you all can visit Jim's studio at the Arts Exchange. So if you go over to the Arts Exchange, be sure you go by his studio. It is a history lesson. It's a museum in and of itself. And you can buy the work, yeah.
And then I used to sometimes just go places to take pictures. Vicky, who was my studio assistant back there for several years, we used to go different places. She brought a picture to me not long ago. Last week, she gave me, a week before last, a picture that she took of me. I went to shoot up at, we were doing a workshop up in the woods somewhere. And then that picture is sitting in my studio now. People are asking me, how were you in your 20s when you took that picture, right? Yeah, she was in her 20s. People asked me, was I in my 20s? Hell no, I was about almost 50, looking 20. For those of you who don't know, I'm 89 years old. And then I have some other folks in here who look out for me, who think that I don't know what the hell I'm doing, or I might I might trip and fall or whatever. These two ladies right here in the front. Yeah. Yeah, they think they're helping me out. They're in my way most of the time. While I'm trying, and then they want to drive for me. You know, I appreciate it. I love them, you know. So it's good. I think we might do better if we ask some people if they have any questions.
Well, I would like to ask, you already told us about the first two pictures. Can you tell us about the third picture?
Okay. That third picture, if you'll notice, looking at it on the bottom, you'll see the top of a policeman's hat. Okay? You'll see the top of a policeman's hat. That photograph was Duke Ellington's funeral. I have a series of pictures of Duke Ellington and his orchestra. And he died a couple of years after I took those pictures. And I decided I wanted to go to his funeral when he passed. So they had this big church. There's this big church in New York where they had the funeral, St. Peter's. I think the church held about 3,000 or 4,000 people. And they had a area inside the church roped off, and they had the media people in there, photographers and writers and stuff. I didn't want to be roped off. So I left back out and went outside, and I was out there for a while. And then I saw this pole there, and it had one of these boxes on it up the pole. Anybody ever been in New York where they have these alarm boxes that said, in case of fire, break glass? I shimmied up that pole, and I was able to get one leg, one cheek on that box, on top of the box, and I got my arm around the pole, and I sat there for 4 hours taking pictures, all right? And they had, I guess, about 3,000 or 4,000 people outside who couldn't get in the church, all right? And so when it was all over, I was hurting. And there was a plainclothesman there, brothers. He came over to me. He said, "You look like you got a problem." I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "I can't move." And he got these two cops to lift me down. And there was a little patch of grass over on the side. And one of the cops massaged my leg and my butt until the blood started running again, and I was all right. Okay? I guess it might have been 2 years later. I went to a precinct down in that area and asked if any policemen there knew who the guy was. And they told me, yeah, he was retired and where he was, and somebody who knew him. and I gave him a picture. I gave him a picture of himself. I took a picture, and he was standing over there when the coffin had went by. He had took one of the flowers off of the coffin, and he was standing there with the flower. And that picture is in my collection at Emory, which we'll talk about shortly. Okay.
You know, everything, you know, the world could go crazy. And I don't know if y'all have ever felt this before, like, but you could be around something crazy, but the moment you put up a camera, it's like, it kind of takes you out of whatever it is, and you can find this steadiness, right? And you being up on a pole like that, you definitely wanted to get those pictures, so,
It's a committed
Go ahead, Brother
photographer.
Jim.
A committed photographer.
Now, Sue, you also had some photos
did-
that you wanted
yeah,
to
let me
share.
see if I
So
can-
basically, I asked both of them to prepare 3 photos that spoke to their career, their craft, 3 photos that resonated with them. And
Okay, let me see if I can
hopefully,
get to this. So
let's see.
I'm going to actually change the order of them to talk about them. Okay.
This picture is one of my favorites, and it's one of my favorites for a couple of reasons. It was the inauguration of Janetta Betch Cole as the first female president of Spelman. And, but it was also the occasion that she brought together a lot of writers and scholars to have a symposium around her inauguration. And they had a program honoring a number of black women writers. This is a photo that we took following the program. It wasn't during the program, it was after the program on the steps of the Fine Arts Building. And Jim and I both were there. We were neither of us was the official photographer for Spelman. I don't know who that was at the time, but we both managed to capture this in our own fashion. Mine was color and horizontal, and Jim's is black and white and vertical. But it's an amazing group of women, many of whom are my friends: Sonia Sanchez, Nikki Giovanni, Mari Evans, Tony K. Bambara, the matriarch Gwen Brooks, Pearl Clegg, Louise Merriweather, Pinky Gordon Lane, who was the other, at that time, the only other woman poet laureate, black woman poet laureate. She was poet laureate of Louisiana. Janetta, and Paula Giddings, who is not a creative writer, but a historical writer. She wrote Where and When I Enter, and the incredible biography, which must be this thick, of Ida B. Wells Barnett. But that was a particularly meaningful time to me, because I grew up, you know, in a time when we were starting the Black Studies and Black Arts movement, and so I knew all of these people, to me, were sheroes. So that's one picture that means a lot to me.
If I can add a little bit to that, when we finally got them down there with people not running up trying to shake the hands of the people in the picture, we ran them off, and so up above them you can see just a little bit of a smiling face up there. You can't see that unless you look at the building. It was a sculpture. But when I decided I wanted to take a horizontal picture, I told Sue, I said, go ahead and get your picture. Sue went on and took her picture. And when I went to take my picture, I said to him, I got my camera all ready, vertical. I said, y'all look like you're getting hung. You know, and they bust out laughing, and that's when I took the picture. And so that's why you see the picture that I took real, and they all activated, you know, if I could say it that way. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
And this is a picture I call She Rose. This is three women who had a special bond that you don't really want to have, and that is that all of their husbands were assassinated as a result of their activities in the movement. You have Betty Shabazz, the widow of Malcolm X, Coretta Scott King, a widow of Martin Luther King, and Myrlie Evers Williams, the widow of Medgar Evers. And this was, it just tells you why you always need to keep your camera around, you know, because we had been at, you know, one of these interminable civil rights dinners. It was a Salute to Greatness dinner, and it had gone on for hours. And, you know, we went to get something to eat afterwards. And because you don't eat during the banquet, there's too much going on. And so Ingrid Saunders Jones said, "Sue, don't you have your camera?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, let's go take some pictures, because this is a historic moment, you know." And we went back up to Miss King's suite. This is probably now 1 or 2 in the morning. We're taking these pictures. And so it was a really special occasion. But they were actually very close friends that shared that kind of special bond. And this is my heroes picture. These are 4 of the 5 Black Atlanta leaders who have received the Presidential Medal of Honor. The other one was Hank Aaron. He wasn't able to be there that day, but this was for Joe Lowry's birthday when he was 93, I believe. And C.T. Vivian, Joe Lowry, John Lewis, and Andy. And, you know, a year later, within a year, they had C.T., John, and Joe had passed. Joe passed first, and then C.T. and John passed within 24 hours of each other. So these are men who were stalwarts in the civil rights movement, but also liked to have a little fun. And they were having fun at this party. And Joe was dancing in his wheelchair. And the last one, you know, I used to get frustrated because all of the young people were going out during COVID and taking pictures of the demonstrations after George Floyd and all of the police brutality cases that were happening. And I was older and was not about to get out in crowds, you know, at that time. I wasn't ready to do that. But this was 2 days after the big riot in Atlanta, and we were driving around that afternoon to see what had happened. Look at all of the places that had been vandalized and places where people were, and we just were driving up Peachtree Street, and the demonstration came to me. And so we were driving up Peachtree Street, and then a demonstration came from the CNN Center and came down Peachtree Street, and we just stopped a car and stayed there, and I started taking pictures then. So I was able to get some pictures of the Black Lives Matter and George Floyd can't breathe things, but you know, it was very frustrating during COVID not to be able to be out in the streets, so to speak. And this was kind of one of my first outings in terms of doing it. And I actually shot this all from inside the car. I shot the whole march from inside the car, but that was another fun. But it was another good experience. I don't know if y'all want to see it, but I also did bring. Did most people get to see the video that the AJC did for Black History Month for me? I don't know. Well, it's a short video. I can show it, or I can wait until after the discussion and show it. Either way, go ahead and show it. Okay. All right. I didn't go into photography as a career ever. I didn't ever take a photography class, and I never did photography in high school and college. So I did it mainly just to record what we were doing. I always carried my camera with me. It was almost like it was attached to my body. So they always knew Sue Ross as the little short woman with the camera, you know. 1, 2, 3. My name is Susan Jessica Ross, and most people call me Sue. I'm known as the Photo Griot in Atlanta because I document the history of our community through photography. I always considered Atlanta as a magical, mythical place, but it is above all a place of change. You know, it's a place where what was I didn't go into photography as a career ever. I didn't ever take a photography class, and I never did photography in high school and college. So I did it mainly just to record what we were doing. I always carried my camera with me. It was almost like it was